Great. So my name is Tessa Jagger. I'm the executive director of Herman-Grima and Gallier Historic Houses. It's two historic houses in the French Quarter in New Orleans. Here you can see the two museums. The red brick building is Herman-Grima House, and the one with the Paris green ironwork is Gallier House. Herman-Grima House was built in 1831 and includes a Federalist architectural style. Gallier House was built in 1861 by local architect James Gallier Jr. and is in a Victorian style. The Women's Exchange, which runs the museum, was established in 1881. It remains one of the oldest women's nonprofits in the South. It was originally started as part of the sort of national women's exchange movement, which was consignment shops that allowed women to anonymously sell their wares outside of the house. So at a time that was socially frowned upon to make money outside the house, this was an opportunity for women to sell their arts or crafts or whatever it may be. And our museum gift shop still follows in the exchange shop tradition. We predominantly stock vendors and artisans that are local women. And this year is our 140th anniversary. Another big anniversary, the museum itself opened in 1971, so it's our 50th anniversary as a museum. And not only do we speak about the Hermans, the Grimas, and the Galliers, but also the nearly 70 individuals who were enslaved on the properties. 32 were enslaved by the Grimas, 28 by the Hermans, and 8 by the Galliers. I just want to note the number for the Galliers is lower. However, as I mentioned, Gallier House was built in 1861, so there wasn't a long period of time before emancipation. So the fact that that number is lower isn't representative of anything other than the amount of time that they're in the house. So I thought I'd make a Sazerac for everyone today. It's a very spirit-forward drink. We are still very much recovering from Hurricane Ida here in New Orleans. We have tens of thousands of dollars worth of damage on the houses that we're fundraising for. So I could definitely use a spirit for a drink right now. So I have a little mixing glass here, and we're going to add 2 ounces of Sazerac rye, or really any rye whiskey that you have will do the trick. Don't tell Sazerac I said that. I'll just do that. And then we're going to add 1/4 ounce of Demerara sugar syrup. So just a simple syrup, really. It's a 2-to-1. Do that. And then 3 dashes of Peychaud's bitters. Oh, there we go. Or Angostura bitters is fine. And then you just stir that up. Traditionally, you spray your glass with absinthe, but I'm using Herb Saint, which is a traditional substitute here in New Orleans as well. So you just kind of do that. Put a couple sprays in your glass. And I am not a bartender, but I'm doing my best here. Do that. And there you go. I picked this drink for a couple of reasons. One, it's relatively easy to make. Most of the ingredients are pretty easy to find. It's also a very New Orleans drink. And it's considered by some to be the oldest American cocktail. There are historians who point to the use of the word cocktail prior to the Sazerac being invented. However, I haven't seen anyone call a different cocktail the oldest American cocktail. So I'll just say that it's often called that. So a little bit about what was happening in New Orleans. at that time. So what we do at Herman-Grima and Gallier Historic Houses is we often use food and drink as a way for people to connect to this history. Obviously, food and drink is something New Orleans is very well known for and people are interested in. So it's a great way to kind of get people in the door and then start building out this history around the food and drink. So by 1789, there were 94 licensed taverns in New Orleans. New Orleans is a big city, but it's a small city. Around now, Orleans Parish, which is the parish or county that New Orleans sits in, it takes up the parish, is about 390,000. To give you a sense of our size now, obviously it was much smaller in population in 1789. So to have 94 licensed taverns is pretty significant and kind of sets that history for New Orleans for what it's known for today. Not only today do we have these sort of, looser restrictions around alcohol as far as like go cups and stuff like that, that have obviously started to become more popular in other cities since the pandemic, but have always been here in New Orleans. There were also other things that were a little less restrictive, such as the fact that men, women, and free people of color could all run taverns in New Orleans. I'd like to talk about an event that we talk about a lot at Herman-Grima and Gallier Historic Houses, which is the Haitian Revolution from 1791 to 1804. People sometimes refer to New Orleans as the northernmost point of the Caribbean. And yes, kind of on the water, but culturally very much so. And a big part of that comes from the Haitian Revolution. It created a lot of the melting pot that we have today. About 10,000 people came to New Orleans by 1809 due to the Haitian Revolution, which again, the population at that time, that's a pretty significant influx of people. The Haitian Revolution was a slave revolt, a successful slave revolt. And so the 10,000 people were a combination of people of European descent who may have been former enslavers and didn't feel like Saint Domingue, which is now Haiti, was a safe place to stay for obvious reasons, or those who were enslaved there, who no longer, also for obvious reasons, wanted to stay in this place that held a lot of trauma for them. So that brought about 10,000 people to New Orleans. Part of that wave was a gentleman named Antoine Peychaud. He set up a pharmacy at 437 Royal Street in 1841. I think at that time it was 90 Royal Street. There's been a lot of renumbering of the French Quarter over the years, but it's right around the corner from Herman-Grima House. And that pharmacy was Pharmacy Peychaud. And he made bitters, and they were used for medicinal purposes, which was very common at that time. Next to him was a place called Merchants Exchange Coffee House. Coffee houses then were more like coffee houses of Amsterdam. Yeah, they were a little more places to go and have some drinks than to have coffee necessarily. And they were selling a popular brandy, and I apologize, my French is awful. They were selling a popular brandy at that time named Sazerac de Forges. It was so popular that they actually renamed the coffee shop Sazerac Coffee House. And they were putting the Peychaud's bitters into that brandy, which was sort of the invention of the Sazerac cocktail. So as we mentioned in the recipe, we're using whiskey. So why does brandy play a part in this? So around the end of the 19th centuries, aphids devastated the vineyards of Europe. And so a local liquor had to be used. And this kind of talks about, the shift with especially the French and the Spanish, from wine and brandy to drinking things like whiskey. So that's a short kind of version of the Sazerac. I'm just going to go back to the recipe really quick for you. So in these three ingredients, it's super simple, but it also hits really important parts of history that kind of shape New Orleans. So the rye, talking about why alcohol is such a big part of New Orleans, why it's the whiskey and not, wine and brandy. The simple syrup, I mean, we could go on for days and days about how sugar is influenced not only New Orleans, but then both North and South America, and obviously the role of sugar in the transatlantic and domestic slave trade. And then Peychaud's bitters, talking about the history of bitters, why we have such a strong cocktail culture here, and also having that Haitian Revolution history built into that as well. So this is the open hearth kitchen at Herman-Grima House. As I mentioned, we're going to talk about both drink and food. This is one of the only remaining functioning open hearth kitchens in Louisiana. You can see the fire in the back, and then on the side are the stew holes, which kind of operate like a stovetop. Our cooking program began in 1978. Currently, we do it every other weekend in the winter. If you've been to New Orleans, it is very hot in the summer, and it's even hotter when you're standing in front of an open hearth fire. So we only do it in the winter for the safety of our docents. The program was kind of deprioritized for a little while. I came in as executive director in December of 2019, and this is something that has been really important to me as far as reinvigorating the program. So we recently received a New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation grant, which helped us to kick off the kids cooking program. For that, we partnered with a bunch of chefs around New Orleans. So it was an opportunity for us to kind of give back to the restaurant industry at a time that they were really hurting. We also partnered with Son of a Saint, which is a really great local nonprofit that works with young men and boys who, for whatever reason, don't have a father figure in their life, and they're paired with mentors. And then we also partnered with Southern Food and Beverage Museum. So through this, not only did we have the chefs creating simple recipes with ingredients that were economical and easy to find, but also talking about careers in food. So the chefs were specifically chosen because they had different paths to becoming successful chefs. So we had one who had gone sort of the fine cuisine schools, that whole path, and now runs a fine cuisine restaurant. Someone who went that path and now runs pop-ups around town. We had one chef who literally started as a cook at McDonald's and then received a scholarship to a school. We also had Miss Linda, who's the Yakamane lady, who is a local celebrity. And Yakamane is a local sort of noodle dish. And she started just by selling styrofoam cups of the soup at festivals, and then has grown this little empire. So we showed all the different ways you can participate as a chef, but we also talked about the history of food. And maybe you're not a chef, but you love food and want to talk about the history. Maybe you want to come and work at the museum and participate in the cooking program. Another thing that we talk about a lot is the Creole Cookery book. And you can see it here. This was first published in 1885 by the Christian Women's Exchange. The Women's Exchange that runs our museum was originally called the Christian Women's Exchange. Over time, as the organization became more inclusive, the Christian part was dropped. It was published in the same year as La Cuisine Creole, which was published anonymously. These are considered the first New Orleans cookbooks. These came much later than cookbooks in other parts of the US. The first American cookbook was American Cookery by Amelia Simmons, and that came out in 1796. So it's about 96 years or 90 years difference there. There are a lot of theories as to why. One of them is that the publishing business was less developed in the South than it was in the Northeast. And that's because agricultural business was more the focus. Sugar, as we talked about before, cotton. But another theory is the cooks themselves. The cooks at Herman-Grima House, this is what we know right now. We assume there are more cooks in this, and we only know that these were cooks at Herman-Grima House because cooking was something that was listed as a skill on either their sales documents or their purchase documents. Charlotte was 17 when she came to Herman-Grima House at 1831 after being purchased by Samuel Herman Sr. She was described as a good ironer and cook in the French tradition. Sarah was 27. She lived at Herman-Grima House for 19 years until she was sold as part of a sheriff's liquidating sale. The Hermans ended up declaring bankruptcy, which is where the Grimas end up coming in. Sarah was referred to as a good cook. Adolf was 27 and was referred to as a good cook. We actually don't have any listings of what his skills were, but we are guessing from the name that he was a cook as well, especially since he came to Herman-Grima House at the age of 30. So he would have had established skills at that time. Felix was 36 and was described as a coach driver, house servant, and cook. So how does this all come into play? So slavery had a lot of impact on the New Orleans cuisine. There are, French traditional cooking was what was favored by most of the wealthy families. But a lot of those ingredients weren't available in New Orleans or around New Orleans. Foods that were native to Western Africa were okra, watermelon, black-eyed peas, and yams. Anyone who's familiar with New Orleans or Southern cuisine in general certainly recognizes those as staples of Southern cooking. Cooking traditions that were being used were one-pot cooking, barbecuing, frying, and cooking in ashes. Again, things that are still very prevalent in Southern cooking. New Orleans was originally an indigenous seasonal outpost. The indigenous groups who lived in the area kind of recognized that this was maybe not the best place to build a permanent establishment due to the weather. So they just came here seasonally. The French were the first to come and kind of create a temporary base here, and then the Spanish. When American rules started after the Louisiana Purchase, a lot more restrictions came in for enslaved individuals in the city than were in place prior to that. One of those was an anti-literacy law, and there were lots of these that were kind of sweeping the country at the time. So that meant anyone who was enslaved could not legally learn how to read or write. No one could legally teach them how to read or write. So when you're thinking about cookbooks, and when you're thinking about the enslaved people who are predominantly cooking the food, that meant that they had to memorize hundreds, maybe thousands of recipes. So that kind of leads you to not having cookbooks in New Orleans at our New Orleans base. Also, as we kind of talked about previously, they're still trying to figure out how to recreate these French dishes without having all the same ingredients. So I want to talk about gumbo a little bit. Gumbo is one of those things that is very New Orleans. It's very representative of the mix of New Orleans. It is a word that's even used to mean like a mix of things. For those who don't know, gumbo is a stew with a thickener, vegetables, and usually meats. Gumbo comes from the Bantu words, and this is going to be even worse than my French, Otengombo or Gyangambo, which means okra. The Native Americans who were here were also making a similar stew. We know at least the Choctaws were, and they used filet, which is ground up sassafras as their thickener. So Africans introduced okra as the thickener and also added a little bit of extra flavor to the dish. And then roux, which is the base, is obviously of French origin. So it's kind of all these different cultures coming together to make gumbo. This is a recipe from the Creole Cookery book that I wanted to share with you guys. All of them read like this, but I think this one is particularly interesting when we're talking about gumbos. When you read the recipes, they don't look like recipes now. They very much feel like oral tradition being passed down. And so that kind of comes from these enslaved individuals who were not allowed to learn how to read or write. And they're, after emancipation, they are passing on their recipes, how they've kind of taken these French traditions and local ingredients and adjusted these dishes. And they're communicating orally how to make these. So for okra soup, you cut up in fine slices 2 soup plates of okra. I really love that measurement. And put it into a soup pot with 5 quarts of water and a little salt at 10 o'clock. So this is something else that we see. Instead of like, this is how much time it takes to make it, the cooks who have been making these dishes know that this dish is usually served around 3 or 3:30. So they're only going to tell the recipe in order to make sure that it's done for 3 or 3:30. At 11 o'clock, put your meat into the soup pot. At 12 o'clock, peel a soup plate and a half of tomatoes. And after straining them through a colander, throw them into the soup pot. Then season with pepper and salt. Allow all the ingredients to boil till 3 o'clock when it's fit to be served up. So it's just a really wonderful kind of very verbal way of describing a recipe. And Creole Cookery is still something that we sell in our exchange shop. So if you haven't taken a look, I do encourage taking a look. And I am close to out of time, so I'll open it up to questions. Okay, let's see if we have anything here.
Hi, everyone. Please feel free to put some questions in the question answer space or the chat. Thank you so much, Tessa. That was a wonderful conversation. What programs are you looking forward to hosting next year?
Yeah, that's a great question. I am very excited, as I mentioned, for our cooking program that is starting up again for the winter next month, and that will roll into next year. We're part of the French Quarter Museum Association, so about 7 different institutions around the French Quarter. And we've started doing holiday markets in the courtyard as like a response to the pandemic, but also I think just something really wonderful to continue. So we'll have one in December for the holidays. And then we also have a Mother's Day one. So that will fall into next year. And we're trying to create these traditions of like, I don't know if any of you've been to Christmas markets, but we're trying to like recreate that feeling in New Orleans. So that's something I'm really excited about right now.
Great. Yeah, I loved seeing your products last year. I put together that Christmas catalog and it was so fun getting to explore your museum shop. I definitely recommend everybody going into the chat box and getting that link. There's so many amazing products. We have some more questions coming in. Someone else asked, how are the other museums in the area doing after the hurricane as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in New Orleans, for the most part, Ida was kind of a sneaky hurricane. It did less of like one big piece of damage, but lots of little damage that really is adding up, lots of shutters and windows and roof leaks. And there were a lot of power surges that happened. So for instance, we lost a condenser on our HVAC. So there's a lot of things like that that like quickly add up. just outside of New Orleans, places like Whitney Plantation, River Road, they were very heavily hit because they were underneath the eye.
Mm. Yeah. We have another question. Do you have any virtual programs coming up that attendees across the country could come to?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a monthly lecture series called Gallier Gatherings. We made it virtual at the start of the pandemic. And this month we actually had our first in-person one since the start of the pandemic. But we've really enjoyed being able to reach so many people outside of New Orleans and around the world. We've had people tune in from France and Australia. So we are going to sort of quarterly have one in person, and then the other 2 months of the quarter have it virtual. So next month you can still register for. It is on the Master Craftspeople of New Orleans. We have an exhibition that just opened called Artistry and Iron, and it's all about the history of blacksmiths in New Orleans. And our speaker is John Hankins, who works with the local craftspeople. And then after it leaves the museum, Gallier House, it is traveling to 2 branches of the New Orleans Public Library. This was something that was really important to us and part of our application for the grant that we received from the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities. We know that not everyone is comfortable with museums. They weren't necessarily brought up feeling welcomed at museums. We also know transportation to the French Quarter can be difficult for some. So we are moving the exhibition after it's in the museum to these 2 branches of the library, to neighborhoods that have some of the lowest percentage of people who have vehicles. So they can walk to the library, and they're probably familiar and feel safe and welcomed at the library. So it's an opportunity for us to start connecting with these communities, and then hopefully they'll come down to the museum in the future. But you can catch the virtual program on that. We have our old virtual programs are recorded on our YouTube page. If you're interested in alcohol, we have a really great one with Dr. Kristen Burton, who has her PhD in the history of alcohol. So it's a very cool lecture on sort of how New Orleans became a cocktail town.
Well, we have another question. What is in bitters? I don't even think I know.
Yeah, so bitters are a combination of herbs. Usually they're used now in like the same quantity that they were then. It's usually droppers or like a teaspoon at most. In Peychaud's, let me see. I need like my reading glasses for this. I don't actually know what herbs go into Peychaud's. My boyfriend is a cocktail bartender, and he's going to be really embarrassed that I don't know that when I tell him after this.
Well, we'll look it up and send it out to our attendees afterwards, maybe. I just wanted to say that we have had so many people comment about how wonderful this program was, and we are so lucky to count you among our great American treasures. So thank you for this program, and best of luck. Again, if you're out there and you want to support an amazing group of women businesses as well, because I know your gift shop has a lot of local artisans, please check out that gift shop. It's an amazing collection of items. So thank you, Tessa.
Yeah, no problem. Along one little plug for that, we actually sell bitters through the exchange shop. It's a company called El Guapo Bitters. It's a local woman who runs it. It's a very male-dominated business, so we're really excited to support someone who makes really, really great syrups and bitters.
Awesome. Thank you. Maybe we'll put that in the Christmas catalog this year.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Dennis Stroughmatt, and he is an amazing fiddle player, and his band are here, and they're coming up right now, and I'm going to pass it over to him, so I hope you all enjoy.
Okay. All right. Bonjour tout le monde. On est ici Dennis Stroughmatt et l'esprit créole. On vient d'ici dans le moyen des États-Unis, dans le pays des Illinois. So for y'all out there, hello, my name is Dennis Stroughmatt. This is Greg Bigler over here. This is Doug Hoff here, and we are l'esprit créole. And we hope that you'll be able to hear us okay. We're going to play some French music for you, that French Creole music from the Midwest. We're actually coming from the Illinois country in southeastern Illinois. Here's a song here for you that actually kind of comes originally from around Vincennes, Indiana, a song called Au Bois Mesdames. All right. Well, if you're not familiar with Illinois, Missouri French music, I'm sure many of you are familiar, of course, with St. Genevieve, Missouri, and of course the Bolduc House, and many of the properties that the colonial dames have actually been involved with for many, many years. And I've been fortunate to play at some of those homes in St. Genevieve, and of course, many different places in the old Illinois country. And I'm going to keep talking about that. We keep talking about the Illinois country because the Illinois country itself was actually Indiana, Illinois, Missouri. We're not too far from Indiana. We're about 10 miles from Indiana right now in southeastern Illinois. And so with the French, of course, that first came here really in the late 1600s, really began building villages in the early 1700s. And of course, the French language that I speak, and I should actually say that I do speak Illinois French, and there aren't very many of us that do. I learned the language over 30 years ago, actually in the old mines area, which is about 45 minutes west of St. Genevieve, where there's still been, at one point when I first there were hundreds of French speakers in the area. And today there are not very many at all. And but there's still a few of us. And so But the French that we speak is basically the French that came from Normandy, Brittany in the 1600s. And so a lot of our French really is kind of connected to that. It's not Parisian French. A lot of our songs are kind of connected, you might say, to Canada, but our music's also connected to Louisiana, not necessarily Cajuns per se, but the French Creole population that actually arrived in Louisiana about 40 years before the Acadians arrived in Louisiana. But there is a great connection, and so we'll continue to play some of these songs for you. We'll do a fiddle tune. This is actually a song called Tout a des dames, kind of an example of some of the Celtic connection of some of our music. As I mentioned, we're in the Illinois country, and that is Indiana, Illinois, Missouri. This was essentially a department of Upper Louisiana. And of course, like I said, a lot of our French ancestors that came in here came from Brittany, from Normandy, and had a Celtic background. This song called All the Girls is actually used every year in St. Louis, there at the Arch in the old courthouse, where they do a dance every year in commemoration of the 12th night, which is 12 days after Christmas, 6 days, of course, after New Year's, or La Guillonne. So we'll do it for you, something called Tout a des dames, which means all the girls. Okay, G. Sounds in a little bit of a way, kind of like an Irish jig. But of course, the Irish were also Celts, and many of our French that came here also had a Celtic background, of course, coming from Brittany. In fact, many of the people at the time when our French ancestors were coming here actually spoke Gaelic. So definitely a part of some of the history and some of the culture. Now, of course, waltzes are important in our music, and when I learned to play the fiddle, I really kind of started learning from three different, well, mainly two. There was a third, two different fiddle players, a gentleman by the name of Charlie Paget, and one by the name of Roy Bouyer, a third by the name of Pete Bouyer, Pete Paco Bouyer. He was a great storyteller too. And but as I was learning to play the fiddle, I was also learning songs, learning lyrics of songs. And this was a tune that actually came from a lady by the name of Ida Portel. And it was a song called Grand-mère se plaint, which means grandmother complains, is the name of it. And this is also a song that you would find in Vincennes, Indiana. We know that it was there as well. And like I say, one of the things is that when I was learning these songs, I was learning most of them from living people. And I made recordings of them, or recorded people's homes. So the language, like I say, in the songs that I learned really have been passed down. They were passed down orally. But because of written literature and some recordings that were made in the 1930s, in Vincennes, Indiana, we know that some of these songs existed there as well, with some of the last of the French speakers there. So this is a song called, I say, Grand-mère se plaint, which means grandmother complains is the name of it. It's a story about a grandmother complaining about the grandfather sending him off out into the woods to go find some firewood, but he never comes back because he gets eaten by a wolf in the story. And this is a ballad. We like to always talk about these ballads because they're pretty terrible.
Yes. Here's the rule of thumb here. If it's slow and beautiful, it does not have a good outcome.
No. So, you know, we love to do the slow and beautiful tunes, but it's just bad because somebody often usually gets hurt in the slow and beautiful songs, but we'll do it for you. Anyway, something called Grand-mère se plaint. Fiji. Something called Grand-mère se plaint. It really is a pretty song. It is a pretty tune. Unfortunately, like I said, in some cases, we just really don't want to talk actually what's happening in the song, but give me just a second here. We'll grab a little bit of a drink. We've been having a lot of dry weather out here in the Midwest and allergies over the last couple of weeks, so my voice has been suffering just a little bit, so I sound a little scratchy right now.
The fields are full of bean and corn dust right now. The air is.
That's right. Yeah, so that's making it a little bit difficult on the voice right now, but I can play some fiddle. So we'll do another fiddle song. How about we do, we'll do a song. This is, like I said, I mentioned that there's a very strong connection between Canada, of course, and Louisiana. And of course, where we're actually located at one time was considered to be Upper Louisiana and the French colony of Louisiana. And so if you went much further north than where we are, if you get up to say where I-80 is and the area around Chicago, if you were to go north of that, you would consider that to be Canada. So we're really not that far. I mean, we're about 4.5 hours, 4.5, 5 hours south of Chicago. But we're also about 10.5 hours from like Lafayette, Louisiana. So we're kind of, you say kind of in that borderland area, that edge between Canada and Louisiana. So we kind of are a hybrid. Our music is a hybrid in a lot of ways. And this is one of those songs that it's an instrumental. It's something called Pommier Tenonge, which means apple of an angel. And this song is kind of a good indication of, you might say, almost kind of a similar feel to a lot of Canadian fiddle tunes. So, but this is one that came from Charlie Paget, who was in the old mines area, Missouri, Cannon Mines. It's a kid G. Yeah, all right. That is a pretty cool tune. A great fiddle tune. So Charlie Paget himself was a wonderful fiddle player who knew all kinds of stuff. He didn't just play French fiddling. He also loved to actually play the old fiddle square dance tunes of like Tommy Jackson. But it was kind of funny because when you would play with guys like that, sometimes you had to watch it because they get confusing between what songs were like country songs, like American Anglo country songs, and like French songs. But you could definitely tell, when they were playing, there was just a certain style, and a lot of it came from the bowing style. And I've had a lot of people ask me about it over the years. What are some of the differences, between our fiddle style here and, say, for example, Cajun fiddling. If you want to say like Cajun fiddling, for example. And probably it would be easier almost to demonstrate it playing a song, but I'll show you, and we will do a song. And I'll switch fiddles over here and do a song here for you and show you. But just, in difference in, for example, our French Creole fiddling, there's a lot of short bowing, just like on a song like that. You kind of see, sorry. I don't use much of the bow. It's all right here. We don't do a whole lot of long bowing. Even in the waltzes, you don't see, things like you go. That is Cajun style. That is actually more Cajun style. Whereas when you went into our waltzes, when you hear, it's actually there again, kind of more short bow. So, and whether that is because of a classical influence, I'm not really sure, but it's just an example that you will find in our songs. Our ballads are often very lilting. The violin played in it is usually very, very pretty. In some cases, like say, maybe even towards a classical bent to it. As far as the fiddle tunes, a short, fast bowing that you don't really hear. Like in Cajun music, for example, you do hear it some more in like Canadian style. So you could say that, but there are examples of songs that we do have that exist in like lower Louisiana and upper Louisiana, but they don't exist in Canada. So we do have some kind of connections between like Cajun country, lower Louisiana and upper Louisiana. And I'm going to switch fiddles and try not to knock down my water. In doing so, let me see if here I can put this here. I'm going to switch, and because my voice, usually I play the higher tune, the standard tune violin for this song, but I think tonight I'll go low. And let me tune just really quickly. We're going to play a song for you that's this was actually a Spanish guitar concerto. This was a song that see, a lot of people don't know, and maybe if you're familiar with history, with the history of the Illinois country got split in two, essentially, after the French and Indian War. Everything that was east of the Mississippi River, Illinois, what it became the state of Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, because there were actually some French even floating around in Kentucky, Michigan, all of that area, that all of course, because become British territory, became English. Everything west of the Mississippi River, of course, St. Louis, which had just been founded at the end of the French and Indian War, this became Spanish territory. It was French, but the French ceded Louisiana, or La Louisiane, west of the Mississippi River, to Spain. The King of France, King of Spain were cousins. So the King of France ceded it, or Louisiana, La Louisiane, to Spain to keep it out of the hands of the British. And because the Spanish had been neutral at that point. So this was a good opportunity to sort of like also kind of divest from much of North America at that point. And so the Spanish, when they came, of course, they were already in Mexico. They were already in Central and South America. And so they were very, very close. It was easy to come through New Orleans and begin, colonization in small parts here and there. And so, but they didn't just bring people, of course, they brought foods. We all love peppers. They brought language. They brought instruments like this instrument. And they brought them up the Mississippi River. And like I say, there's a guitar concerto called J'ai passé devant ta porte, which means I passed. It's a ballad. It means I passed in front of your door and you were dead, is the name of it. So
it's a slow and beautiful tune, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a slow and beautiful song. And unfortunately, we're sorry. It's another one. This is one, like I said, that's actually well known in Louisiana. And they know this one in Cajun country. And actually, the first time I ever went to Louisiana and got into a jam session in Cajun country, it was the only song I knew. Like I say, because in a lot of ways, we have a very, very deep repertoire of music here in songs, ballads, and fiddle tunes, but just not a large number of songs cross over between southern, lower Louisiana and upper. But this is one. There are others that do. There are others, and I might actually do one for you here a little bit later. But we'll do this one. We'll do it in the key of C, something called J'ai passé devant ta porte. pretty song. It's a very, very pretty tune. We're sorry we had to tell you what happened in the song. Unfortunately, that we just have to. But
We're
I tell
just
you
the
what,
messengers, aren't we?
that's right. We're just the messengers. We didn't write any of this. We didn't write any of these. Well, that's not entirely true. I did write one song, but I only take credit for the lyrics on that one. And but most of the tunes that we do are traditional songs, and would not really call ourselves a revivalist band. We're just a preservationist band. Just keeping the songs alive more than anything. I was fortunate to spend a great deal of time around a lot of folks who had learned these songs basically generationally from parents or grandparents, and so we're just keeping them going, keeping them alive, still doing the tunes and as much as possible. And I know, like I say, I'll probably get maybe a question or two be like, well, what besides of the singing, what does the language sound like? Is it different than like Parisian French? Well, par exemple, quand je m'en parle, moi je dis peut-être un peu charré, tu peux voir c'est notre accent. Et c'est presque comme un Canadien, mais c'est presque comme les Français qui parlent dans le sud de la Louisiane. Mais c'est les deux. Mais c'est pas le même qu'il y en a eu en Canada. C'est pas le même dans la Louisiane. Mais moi, je peux comprendre le français dans la Louisiane et je peux comprendre le français du Canada, au Québec. C'est pas un problème, c'est presque nous autres. C'est juste à côté. Je connais, c'est pour nos Français, ça arrivait, c'est plus de 300 ans passés. Ça continue aujourd'hui d'être quand même qu'il y a eu ici depuis nos ancêtres c'est arrivé. So the French that we speak here is very, from what we understand, is pretty much very similar to what came here in a lot of ways. And I mean, our French, and a lot of it via anecdotally, I've learned by being in France and being in Canada that a lot of people have listened to our French and they go, wow, that really kind of sounds like it could be Norman French or Breton French or older French. And it is. And so like I say, it's not really Cajun French. It's not Canadian French. Similar, yes, similar to both. And but neither in that sense. So, but I'm going to get back to playing another song for you. I'll do another instrumental since I still have this fiddle in my hand. We'll do this song here for you. One of the things that brought our French here, and really it was one of the major, you might say, catalysts that brought the French into this area physically. Now, what brought the French exploring was different than necessarily what actually brought the French here physically. And that's, of course, the French came here looking for gold. They were also looking for a westward passage. There was also the possibility of looking in, because of the fur trade, and trading with the native population. But what was so important early on, though, in the 1700s was actually lead mining. And it was because when the French came looking for gold, they didn't find it. They found lead, they found iron. It was easier to smelt lead, ship it down the Mississippi River to New Orleans from St. Genevieve, from St. Louis, and of course, Kaskaskia on the Illinois side. But St. Genevieve became that more important port because you could bring lead overland from the Ozarks, or the mountains, mountain range of old mines, essentially what is now old mines, Potosi, along Route 21, and they would bring the lead on the back of mules to St. Genevieve, put it on flatboats, ship it down the Mississippi River. So I learned this song from Roy Bouyer, and basically he said this is kind of like almost like a theme song for those pack mules bringing the lead from the old mines area. So the song itself is called essentially Voyage au Saint-Geneviève, which means really like a trip to St. Genevieve. So if you listen, some people call this the mule song, because if you listen to the song, you will hear the mule kind of talking or bellowing on the fiddle. And but the idea is you kind of speed. Well, it's not really speeding up. It's just a kind of a different sound that you will hear. The chords change, the keys change, makes it kind of sounds like you're going uphill or downhill. So this is kind of like a Missouri mule ride, you might say. So we'll do it for you. Are you there? Attends! Down the hill. Going up the hill. Attends, you there? Arrêtez, you there? There we go. There's the Missouri Mule, or the Voyage au Saint-Janvier, essentially. Okay, I'll grab my other fiddle again. So we'll do this tune here for you. This is, I mentioned before, I would just do a little bit of a song. This is another one. There's no accompaniment behind it. It's just a song that I learned this one from Miss Natalie Vilmer in Old Mines, and there were some other folks in the area that kind of knew the tune as well. And this Miss Natalie is still with us, and she's a great singer, and she speaks some of the French. And I knew her mother, Eileen Vilmer. And well, anyway, this is a cool song. It's something called the Quatre Crapaud. Now, in Louisiana, I actually found this in a book in a kind of a Cajun music book. It's called, I think it's French folk songs of Louisiana. And it's called Le Ben Attelé in there. And it's a story basically of these like 4 frogs that are basically carrying a big bullfrog. It's almost like they're the horse and carriage, but it's frogs in a carriage, and they're the carousel, and they're actually carrying a big bullfrog. We don't know if the bullfrog is like going to a wedding or maybe a funeral. We're really not sure. But anyway, we only have really kind of like maybe part of the song. When I found this book, it was Irene Therese Whitfield, I think is her name. When I found it, I found a few more verses, but I don't do those because that's theirs in Louisiana. This is the way we do it. It goes, j'ai vu un beau carrosse passer, 4 crapauds per la télé, un gros wawaron qui conduisait. Oh oui, monsieur sont deux. Je peux bien se rassurer qu'ils sont allés en eau. I guess I do. J'ai vu le carrosse passer, 4 crapauds vers la télé, un gros wawaron qui conduisait. Oh ouais, monsieur sont deux. Je peux bien se rassurer qu'ils sont allés en noces. So anyway, that's a little bit of that tune, but that's one that we found in Louisiana, or the state of Louisiana, that they have down in Cajun country that we have up here. So, and there again, to explain, our people are not Acadians, are not Cajun. A lot of times that gets kind of confusing, and we've actually do programs, we'll do shows, and we'll be kind of walking away, and people will walk up and they'll say, wow, I really didn't know that there were Cajuns from Missouri and Illinois, and, you know, in Indiana. And we're kind of like, well, we didn't really know that either. So after having done a concert or a program. So, but we'll do another fiddle tune here for you. This is another one. This is another pretty song. This is actually a waltz, something called a Valseminue. This is another one from Charlie Paget. And this might have started out as a minuet. We're not really sure, but it definitely has a strong, you might say, kind of classical feel to it. And this was definitely an old song. It went past Charlie's grandfather's generation, which would have pushed it well into the early part of the 1800s. So we're pretty sure that this was a song that was probably brought by the French, or it could have been introduced by the Spanish as well. So something called Valseminue, or some people call it the Midnight Waltz. Here, see. 1, 2, 3, 1. that is a pretty song. Very pretty tune. No lyrics to that one, so nobody gets hurt in that song. So, which is nice. So, we'll pick things up again. Just do another fast song here for you. This is one of our favorite tunes to do. Actually, it's funny because we're getting ready to, Halloween's only about a week away. You know what they say? As soon as you take down the Halloween decorations, boom, up go the Christmas decorations. So we'll do a Christmas song here for you. This is a tune. I learned this one from Miss Ida Portel, and she was in Potosi. Great singer who could just remember so many different songs and all of the different verses of the tunes. Well, this was one of the tunes that she just sang this a cappella, but Charlie Paggi played this as a fiddle tune. And so Miss Ida wasn't too happy about that because this was actually a church song. And it's called D'où viens-tu bergère, which means, oh shepherd, where you come from. So that's basically about the shepherds, looking for the baby Jesus. And so anyway, but we kind of mix it up. We mix it as between kind of a fiddle song and with the words. And I still think it makes a great dance tune. So we kind of do it as a hybrid. So anyway, it's called D'où viens-tu bergère. Some people call this, in some places they call it Quoi vas-tu bergère. So there's a few different titles, but it's the same song anywhere pretty much across the Illinois country. So, and they would call this song a chanson à répondre. This is a response song. So you'll hear the guys, singing some of the response on this one, because a lot of these old tunes were known. And that's also known for the Celtic background. You hear that, they called that a candescent in Breton Gaelic. And so you hear that on a lot of these old French tunes.
Everyone.
That's right. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. I'll give me a chance here to get another drink. I did want to quickly mention, in case if anybody's interested and they want to find out a little bit more about us and who we are, what we do, We've been fortunate through the years. I have traveled quite a bit, played in Canada, and which has been fun in some of the French-speaking areas of Canada. We've played in Louisiana. We've played in Washington, D.C. We've actually been featured at the Smithsonian. It's a Smithsonian Folk Life Festival, as well as at the Library of Congress. We've also performed at the Kennedy Center. And so if you want to find out a little bit more about us, you can always go to our website, which is creolefiddle.com, creolefiddle.com. We do have some CDs available, although we don't have a bunch available right now. It's been kind of a rough year to keep CDs in stock. We've done pretty well with mail order this year. So if you are interested in one of our CDs, we're kind of limited on our Gambler's Fiddle. That's the first volume. And so, but we do have more of volume 2 and volume 3 coming in. They all have booklets with them. So if you're interested in that, also, if you go on our website, we're not asking for it, but some people always ask. They say, well, do you have anywhere we can tip the band for a virtual performance? Well, yeah, you can. You can go on creolefiddle.com, and we have the donate button on there where you can hit and tip the band of maybe 10 cents or something. With inflation, maybe 15. So, but anyway, if you want to go check out our website, that's great. If you have any questions about anything, that we won't have time for tonight, it's struggle to get around sometimes to answering a lot of questions, but occasionally I try to. So you can definitely contact us, and maybe one of these days, if we're out to get out to perform wherever you are, we'd love to come to you someday. That'd be fine as well. But we're going to do one more song for you. But before I do that, I will have to ask a question. If anyone has any questions, I don't know if we have the ability to do that. We can maybe try to answer one or two questions before we end. Would you like to? We'd like to do that, to answer any questions, or if anyone has?
Yeah, we had a couple questions. Somebody was asking about the Voyagers and whether they would have brought any of these songs over.
Oh, I'm absolutely sure that some of them probably did. One of the things that's kind of funny, though, is the Voyagers. One of the songs, we can do a little bit of that one for you. How about we just go ahead and stay here with us? You don't need to go anywhere. We'll just do a little bit of it. It's how about this guy? We'll just do this. Is one that the G-chord Chevalier. That's a Voyager song. Essentially, that's a Voyager song. So that was actually a tune called Chevalier De La Taberrand that we know that the Voyagers sang, but it's also a song that just farmers even sang. But it's one that people sang on the rivers. It's interesting because we don't have as many, they're there, that we don't have as many like quote unquote Voyager songs that you hear today, like in Quebec or in Canada. There again, because we're not necessarily the same French as the Canadians. We're kind of a mix of lower Louisiana, upper Louisiana and Canada. And you have to remember also too that we got kind of cut off to Canada by the 1760s and 70s. So Voyager songs that kind of became even more popular in the later 1700s, early 1800s, we didn't get those because some of those kind of stopped coming here. But there are a few of them do. Like I say, a few of them have definitely trickled in, and that was one of them right there. Any other questions if we have? Sure.
Yeah, we had a question about how is this music connected with Zydeco? I've actually never seen that word or heard it, so I looked it up.
Zydeco means snap bean. Well, Zydeco music. our music, the connection is extremely loose. I would say it's almost kind of like, and I guess I would put it in this, maybe it'd say, how is our music? How would you say, how is our language, let's say our American English language, how is it connected to like English spoken in Russia? I guess you might say that. It's, there's a connection, but it's very small in a lot of ways. And what it is Zydeco music is actually African Creole music, whereas our music is more like straight up European French Creole. If anything, there's, a native mix, native connotation. Of course, there are a lot of our French here are a mixture of like a Pinkashaw, Pawnee, Osage, Kaskaskia. A lot of us here that, that are French are Native American partially. And so there is that kind of connection, but not really an African Creole connection up here. That would be down in lower Louisiana, in the state of Louisiana. And so you hear a stronger connection between like Cajun music and Zydeco. And probably I just got myself in trouble by even saying that, because Cajun music is different than Zydeco music. And Zydeco music, which is African Creole music, is more of the modern form of what you call la-la music, which was old, African Creole, like string band music, did use accordion, but was sung in French. Zydeco tends to be more sung in English. They don't use fiddles really in Zydeco. They use like drums and electric guitars and keyboards and, things like, and the scrub board, you see that. Whereas like our music here, if we use a percussion instrument, and I can show you, hold on just a second. I'll try to not get myself wound up here. We use this. We actually use this instrument. That's what we use as a percussion instrument, the triangle, but we don't call it that. We call it the bastring. Even down in Louisiana, they call it a tifar, which means a little iron. Here we call it bastring, which actually is, I come to find out, it's the same word that they use up in Canada. So, and I never knew that until some years ago. So, but Zydeco, like I say, is more of almost like Creole rock, you might say. So any other questions really quickly?
Yeah, we have one last one. What would you call your music style? How would you describe it?
It's Illinois, Missouri, French Creole is what it is. I mean, we are Illinois, Missouri. Or you can throw Indiana in there. We don't want to leave out Indiana because it's part of it too. And because we're very, very close to Vincennes, Indiana. In fact, Doug over here only lives really about 20 miles, or as the crow flies, or as you get across the Cannonball Bridge. So,
what?
Yeah, the Cannonball. That's yeah. You definitely want to ride on the Cannonball Bridge. It's worth it. So anyway, but that's just upriver, and so we're kind of on the eastern edge, and so yeah, you would call it Illinois, Missouri, or Missouri, Illinois French Creole music, and it's French Creole music from the Illinois country. And a lot of people get it confused. They say, so that's Illinois country music, like Nashville? No, not Nashville, like country music. The Illinois country, which means in français le pays des Illinois, which means the country of the Illinois. The Illinois Confederation of Indians, essentially the native population. And so that's what that means. So, well, if we've got time, then we'll do one more song for you before we end. And this one's important. This is the oldest song that we know that may be actually in North America, period. Do this song often. In fact, tomorrow, we're actually going to be playing live in St. Genevieve, Missouri, although it may be a little wet tomorrow. We're supposed to play there tomorrow at the Rural Heritage Festival, but we've played many, many times for La Guillonnée, and which that was what this song is. It's the New Year's tradition. People go begging for food. It's one of the oldest traditions that we have anywhere, pretty much in the United States, is with our tradition here. It's been going on for over 300 years in the Illinois country. La Guillonnée, it means mistletoe year. It's two words. Guy is Breton Gaelic for mistletoe. Guy, mistletoe, année, year, mistletoe year. Guillonnée. People go house to house begging for food on New Year's Eve, and they save it because eventually they're going to have the 12th night ball, the King's Ball, and which eventually later on, because that opens up into Carnival, and then you get to Le Mardi Gras. So anyway, well, again, I want to introduce everybody in the band over here on guitar and vocals with me is Mr. Doug Hoff, everybody. He is from Allendale, Illinois, which is just like I said, just a stone's throw down the Wabash River from Vincennes. Over here from Savoy, Illinois, is Mr. Greg Bigler on the upright bass. You can't really see that stick bass over there, but maybe you can see a little bit of that. So yeah, there you go. And again, my name's Dennis Stroughmatt, and you can find us online at creolefiddle.com. And here's a little bit of La Guillone for you. This is one of the oldest songs, if not the oldest song in North America, coming from Normandy and Brittany nearly 400 years ago. Merci tout le monde, merci encore. C'était un grand plaisir pour nous autres de vous présenter nos musiques qui vient d'ici de la moyenne de l'États-Unis. So thank you again, everybody. We hope you enjoyed some of the music. We had a great time here, and maybe we'll get to see you all live in person maybe sometime down the road. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to pass it over to Mona Tate, who's going to take us out tonight.
All right.
On behalf of all of us, I'd like to thank Tessa Jagger, Dennis Stroughmatt, and the Esprit Creole for the enjoyable program tonight. I'd also like to invite everyone to return tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern Time for the remainder of the conference. Thank you for coming and continue to enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.